I have been a Lord of the Rings fan my entire life, pretty much. I've said this before on stream many times. I genuinely can't remember a time before I'd seen the first any Lord of the Rings movie. I was very young when they came out, young enough that I wasn't able to form memories yet. So I was watching the Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson movies before I could even form memories. And, well into that. It's just always been a consistent aspect of my childhood being a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Now, obviously, I started out as a little kid only really having the movies, right? The Peter Jackson movies. But as I got older, I was able to read the books, everything from the Silmarillion to the Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings main three books to, of course, the Unfinished Tales. And there's a bunch of other stuff that Christopher Tolkien also published that I took a look at as well over the years. And, after many different book collections as well with Lord of the Rings books in them, I'd certainly consumed the story many times. And it's gotten to the point where, if you're a fan of me, Lord of the Rings is just my favorite franchise as far as fandoms go. It's just at the top of the list. When I think of comfort and like a paradise-like setting, I can't help but think of the Shire theme. Like the do 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 do. Yeah, I'm listen, I'm not gonna do the whole thing. But like the music, the visuals, the acting, the everything about the Peter Jackson movies, everything about J.R.R. Tolkien's expanded universe, that you can read about in all of the books and everything. There's just something so comforting and familiar about it, And even The Hobbit, for all of its problems, and I could rant about The Hobbit's problems. The Hobbit, I think the first movie came out when I was 13. When that came out, I was obviously very excited for it. I loved everything Lord of the Rings. I believe that Middle-earth, Shadow of Mordor had already come out or was about to come out. And I was also very excited for that and did enjoy those games, the Middle-earth games. I obviously played Battle for Middle-earth. I obviously played the PS2 games and stuff, Lego games, all that. Yeah, you don't need to go into the Lord of the Rings video games. I had the Lord of the Rings Risk game. And you would I had this big Risk game, but it was Middle-earth, and I would unfold the board and I would hold. It came with a replica gold ring. And I always, I obviously loved that thing, but I would just stare at the map of Middle-earth for hours, just wondering about places, reading portions of the book and then pointing them out on the map, just stuff like that. Going back as long as I can remember, I've been a massive fan of Lord of the Rings. So as you can imagine, when I heard about a Lord of the Rings TV show being in production, well, frankly, I was kind of worried. In fact, I was very worried. I'm going to be honest, I did not think that any human being on Earth was capable of recapturing, to any degree, the magic of Middle-earth that Peter Jackson was able to in his movies. Nothing else has really quite done it. I didn't think it was possible. And from the get-go, when I heard about it, my opinion immediately weighed towards negative. I will not deny that. When I heard that Amazon was making it, it weighed a little bit more towards negative. But then I started hearing news that kind of made me excited. A little bit. I heard that there would be a heavy emphasis on practical effects. That it would be filmed in New Zealand. I learned that it would not be a TV show adaptation of The Lord of the Rings, and that The Lord of the Rings was simply a main title type thing they added to it for no real reason, and that the true show would take place during the Second Age, depicting possibly one of the most awesome and exciting stories in all of Tolkien's story, or legendarium, I should say, and that is without a doubt the story of Sauron deceiving Celebrimbor into making the Rings of Power, Sauron crafting the One Ring, and his whole initial domination, or attempted domination of Middle-earth. Everybody knows the main story of Lord of the Rings. I mean, besides the aspects of the book that are a lot less unknown. I imagine the average like casual Lord of the Rings fan doesn't know who like they probably know who Tom Bombadil is because Tom Bombadil has been memed so much. But like Glorfindel, for example, average like casual Lord of the Rings fan probably doesn't know who that is, right? There's a lot of changes that were made to be sure for like Peter Jackson's movies and stuff like that, but like to be clear, I did not know what to expect going into this show. All right, I didn't know what to expect. I eventually decided before trailers even came out, I would deprive myself of just about everything about this show until I was able to see it myself. I decided, you know what? I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan. Why should I join the naysayer hate bandwagon for this show? I want this to be good. Why should I want this to be bad? Why should I jump on board with these people that seem to want this show to be bad? And I'm not even talking about the people complaining about the wokeness. This is before that was even a thing. This is just back when people were complaining about the existence of this show being in production. They were immediately mad about it. And I was immediately skeptical about it too. So I decided I wasn't going to look at anything about it. And I would just kind of try to avoid anything about it and just watch it myself and enjoy it as if I was watching, frankly, like I was watching The Lord of the Rings for the first time as a kid. And that's what I pretty much ended up doing. I think I covered a few reactionary YouTubers that called out like the trailers and whatnot because of like diversity in the cast or whatever. But I don't think that spoiled me very much. Going into the show, I was pretty damn blind on everything. Obviously not the lore that it was built off of, because I'm very familiar with the books, but as far as what the show was going to cover, how it was going to cover it, the changes they would make, how it would look, most of the plot and everything, I didn't even watch trailers. I wanted to go in without any expectations. And that's exactly what I did. They released the first 3 episodes in the same night. And by the time I finished the 3rd episode, I was hooked. I could not believe what I was seeing. So for starters, The Rings of Power is the most expensive TV show ever made. And it shows. Every single I believe I watched Corridor Crew's video breaking down the VFX of the show earlier today. I believe they said that just about every single known big VFX studio ever worked on this show. All of their individual skills came together to make one of the, like, I'm just gonna say it, the most visually stunning, show or thing brought to film I've ever seen. The show's downright fucking glorious in its visuals. Shots where it's just 2 characters talking look amazing. Shots where we see the massive sprawling mountains of New Zealand, they look better than ever. One of the few things I saw going into this show, actually, that was promotional material, was an image of an orc. This orc right here. Now, if you've seen Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, this orc should immediately make you excited. Because The Hobbit did something that I think most fans can agree was pretty shit. All the orcs were CGI, and they looked all the same. It just wasn't really. There was this level of personality that every orc had in the original Lord of the Rings movies by Peter Jackson. How they were all practical effects and makeup and everything. They definitely had some visual effects they added in, especially to make the orcs' eyes bigger. Like there were some goblins, as they would be called, nicknamed, but they're really just smaller orcs that had like the big eyes with the slits. That was definitely visual effects doing that. The mouth of Sauron, if you look really closely, the visual effects to make his mouth bigger are a little bit sloppy at the Black Gate. But like overall, most of the effects are heavy practical in the original movies. So seeing this motherfucker, this practical looking motherfucker made me happy. So I will admit, I came into the show with a tiny tinge of like, okay, I know the show will look beautiful, and I know the orcs are going to look cool. So at the worst, this show is going to be some nice eye candy to get stoned to and just get re-immersed back into Middle-earth. And you better believe there was eye candy that I got stoned to, and I did get re-immersed back into Middle-earth. But it was not only that. I genuinely found a lot to love from this show, outside of just the visuals. Now, the characters. The main character of the show, if there was to be a central main character, is Galadriel, who J.R.R. Tolkien described himself as quote-unquote the fairest and mightiest elf in all of Middle-earth. She is the Lady of Lothlorien, and she is just an absolute fucking badass. Now, you'll of course know her if you've watched the Peter Jackson movies, as, she was played by Cate Blanchett. And when we see her, she's this fair lady, is really the only way to describe her. She doesn't really seem an intimidating adversary. In Rings of Power, however, they've made what is definitely a bit of a creative change, but one that I think is permissible. One, however, that I think a lot of Tolkien fans have decided is not permissible, though, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. In Rings of Power, young Galadriel is a plate armor-clad, sword-wielding fighter. Now, in the story, written by Tolkien, most of her power comes from a mostly left up to the imagination essence of magic and power that she had kind of innately, but was heavily compounded by her possession of Nenya, the elven ring of water. This, of course, allowed her to preserve her kingdom of Lothlorien, but it also granted her a lot of other abilities. So at no point is it really given... Are we really given the idea that Galadriel was ever this plate armor-wearing warrior princess? But at the same time, it just works better for me. And it looks cool, and I like it. It makes sense, as far as, like, creative decisions go, to have a character as powerful as Galadriel, who certainly could probably pick up a sword and fuck some people up with it if she wanted. Though she would probably, at least by the point of the Third Age, see that as pointless. I don't really have a problem with that change. I thought it was cool. Her fight scenes are cool, and it's awesome. What I was worried about, though, was that Galadriel would be a Mary Sue. Some people will get mad about me saying this, but Rey in the Star Wars sequel trilogy is a Mary Sue. Not because she's a woman, but because I don't think they did a very good job of writing her character arc. There is a good case to make that she doesn't really have many flaws or fuck-ups like most compelling characters do. Most compelling characters tend to have huge flaws, fuck-ups, or failures that allow us to connect with them, because nobody is flawless. And I'm happy to say that Galadriel is not a Mary Sue in this show. While she may be physically able and quite powerful, her decision-making and personality is, it is a huge part of the story that she is not perfect in that respect. She is the cause of pretty much every bad thing that happens. And they state this outright. She's told by her king, Gil-galad, to sail west to Valinor, to leave Middle-earth and to stay in Paradise and to give up her mission of hunting Sauron, because if she continues on her path, she might enable the evil that she is trying to fight. She doesn't listen to him and jumps into the sea and ends up running into Sauron in disguise, bringing him the power and giving him all the means he needs to do what he ends up doing. His Sauron shit. So she fucks up in that respect. She's deceived by him the entire time. Even after the deception is lifted, she's tempted momentarily by him with the promise of power and ruling over Middle-earth. She still fails in her goal of stopping him because he's still he's still now going to become the Lord of Mordor. She failed in preventing Mount Doom from erupting and the Southlanders from getting wiped out and the land of the Southlands from becoming Mordor. She failed in her task to hunt down Sauron. Literally every task that she's had from the start of the season to the end has been a failure. Every single one has been a failure. But not in like a poor writing, oh, she's a shitty character kind of way, but in her decisions and her mindset is not perfect, and it's causing conflict that she has to deal with, and that's good writing. In fact, something I noticed on, I believe it was episode 7, after Galadriel wakes up in the ashes of Mount Orodruin, blowing up and erupting, she finds Theo, and they're walking through the forest together, and just the entire sequence of Galadriel finding Theo in the burning village and bring him to safety felt very classic Galadriel. It felt as though when Mount Doom erupted and she saw her failure and saw what her headstrong desire to fight the enemy and just fight, no talking, all that shit, right? All of these poor aspects to her personality have caused this. And when she wakes up, she realizes, at least in part, she's not there quite yet, but she's definitely taken a step in that direction, that her current strategy is not working. And that whole sequence where she's walking with Theo really reminded me of classic Galadriel from the Third Age. Just in demeanor, how she's just constantly giving wise, uplifting advice, Scenes where, characters see her and they're, blown away by her beauty, which is literally every time she appears in the books, It's a very, very important aspect of her character, is that when she walks into the room, everyone's like... Yeah, so, they carried that through and everything. Really like Galadriel. Excited to see her character arc as she becomes the Galadriel that we know in the Third Age. Next, we have Arondir and Elrond. Elrond, I don't really have much to say. Fucking amazing. I think everybody, even people that don't like the show, agree. His acting, along with the actor who plays Elrond, along with the actor who plays Durin, the fourth, I believe, amazing. Their relationship, their dynamic, their friendship, Elrond and Durin, amazing. Everybody liked it. Everybody loved it. There's really not much I can say besides that. I feel it was just great. They did a really good job of embodying this concept that I feel like is really realistic in this world. You see, elves, barring outstanding bad circumstances, are pretty much ageless and immortal. They can die, but they don't grow sick and they don't grow old. And so this means that time, they perceive it differently, right? A couple decades isn't really a big deal to them. Not seeing their friend for a couple decades is like, oh yeah, what do you expect me to do? What do you expect me to constantly be up in your... It's been 10 years since we spoke. You can't just always be up in my face, give us some time since last time we hung out. It's like yesterday to them, right? So Elrond and Durin hadn't spoken for 25 years. And obviously Durin was quite upset by this because while dwarves live quite a while, elves live a lot longer, and dwarves are comparatively still quite short-lived. So, Durin's had kids, he's gotten married, he's built up a kingdom, and become a pretty, well-known and well-respected prince in that time. So, it's definitely an interesting dynamic to see them mend their friendship and get to work with Celebrimbor, who is another character we'll get into in a minute. I forgot, we have another third elven character. Celebrimbor we'll get to him in a minute. Next we have Arondir. Arondir is a Sylvan elf, I believe, who lives in the Southlands, soon to be Mordor, and his job is basically to watch over the men of the Southlands who once sided with Morgoth during the War of Wrath. It's been thousands of years, and for the humans living there, they're like, my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather served Morgoth, okay? I don't even know his name, all right? I don't even know what his name was, all right? Why are you elves that were around for it judging me for my great-great-great-great-great... yeah, so the elves were alive when these humans and, ancestors served Morgoth, and they're getting, treated kind of badly for it. And it's feeding into this cyclical loop of, bad will from the Southlanders towards the Sylvan elves watching over them, leads to more, degradation by the elves, which leads to more hate towards them by the Southlanders, and it just feeds into itself, right? All the while, orcs are spreading through the Southlands, digging tunnels through the lands underneath the villages and houses and all that kind of stuff. The orcs look amazing. They're scary, they're spooky, they're coming up through floorboards, they're attacking people. It's great. I'm loving that shit. We get a fight scene where one orc is an actual threat to a couple of villagers, Theo and Bronwyn. And that scene was fucking great. One orc was like a scary threat. I loved that because they would be, right? I've always thought that like you take an orc from Lord of the Rings and you put it into like a haunted house with a bunch of teenagers and you got yourself a horror movie, right? Like just because those orcs get slown and masked by the main characters in Lord of the Rings doesn't mean those things wouldn't be terrifying to run up against in real life. You know, Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas are literal like super soldiers of Middle Earth, okay? Like the average guy going up against an orc is scared, you know? And I really like how the show depicted that. The orcs really did feel like a genuine threat to the average, you know, even trained fighter among men, which didn't really feel like something that was made as clear, I guess, in the original Peter Jackson movies. It really felt like most of the human characters, at least that we follow, were so badass that they were invincible. Plot armor is actually something I wanted to get to before I get into Celebrimbor. It didn't really feel like, besides the characters that I know live, it didn't really feel like characters have plot armor. We didn't get a ton of main character deaths or anything, but I feel like the characters they're introducing, like Theo, Bronwyn, these characters that are not in the books that they're adding to the show, these characters feel like their fates, anything can happen with them. And there are characters that we know are going to die. Brutally. Very brutally. All right, close your ears for 10 seconds or so if you don't want future spoilers. You've got 3 seconds. This is going to be spoilers for the show in the future. When I make a thumbs up, you guys can uncover your ears, okay? So, thumbs down is while the spoilers are still happening. 3, 2, 1, spoilers happening. Okay. In season, probably late season 2, maybe early season 3, it's hard to say based on the way this show is doing the timeline. Sauron is going to come to Eregion, and he is going to fuck that shit up. He is going to take Celebrimbor and impale him on a spike and turn him into a banner that his armies are going to march with. That is all. So yeah, we're gonna. You're good now. You're good now. No spoilers. We're good. So basically, that is the kind of shit that we have to look forward to in the future. It's gonna be pretty damn awesome. Spoilers. I literally warned you. You have no one to blame but yourself. I think it's time to get to the final part. The final part of my review, okay? I know this wasn't very structured and it was just me gushing for a while, but I just loved it. I'm just talking about something I enjoyed. Final thing I want to talk about is the music. You see, for me, any Middle-earth production, particularly anything Lord of the Rings related, needs to have the music on point. The Lord of the Rings Peter Jackson movies had amazing music. The Hobbit Peter Jackson movies also had amazing music. This show did not disappoint when it came to the music. I was worried. One of the things that I genuinely believed would be near impossible to recapture was how iconic and amazing to listen to the music of the Peter Jackson films and the Hobbit were. And frankly, I wasn't disappointed. So the composer they brought on for the music of this show is Bear McCreary, who you may know from the soundtrack of God of War 2018. That's right. He's the lyrical, musical, whatever you want to say, genius behind this. So that is from God of War 2018. And that same composer is behind the music in Rings of Power. So as you can imagine, the music does not disappoint. This first segment here, this came out 2 days ago in the most recent episode. This is called True Creation Requires Sacrifice. It's on Bear McCreary's YouTube channel. And this is the track from when they were crafting the 3 rings. All right? Get a listen to this. And you guys let me know if this music you think holds up to the legendary score established in Peter Jackson's movies. I like it a lot. I'm a big fan of the soundtrack. It goes very hard. That is as much as I'll play of the true creation requires sacrifice bit. Um, that is the opening of the theme when they're crafting the rings. So, if you're a fan of the original Peter Jackson movies, something you'll know is that a repeated motif that he would constantly do is a lot of characters or character relationships, kingdoms, places, etc., had themes. They had musical themes. And depending on the context, the hype of the theme would change, right? So, for example, in a scene where, like, the Fellowship were just kind of, sitting around and it was sort of a solemn moment, you might hear the Fellowship theme come in and it's like, dun, 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 dun. And that's the Fellowship theme, kind of just slowly kind of going in, right? But in a scene, for example, in the Fellowship of the Ring, where the whole Fellowship is leaving Rivendell, and we see that amazing shot where they're all walking together, and it's like one of the most triumphant scenes in the whole movie, we hear it at its full version, right? With the horns and the trumpets and everything. It's like, dun, 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 dun. Yeah. That is one of my favorite aspects of the Peter Jackson movies, is the musical motifs correspond not just to different characters, ideas, groups, or things, or kingdoms, or whatever, but they're circumstantial. When we first hear the Rohan theme, for example, it's when Edoras is in sort of a fallen state. King Theoden is currently under Saruman's mind control and the influence of Grima Wormtongue. And so it's just sort of a gloomy scene when Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli first show up. So we hear the Rohan theme like do 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 on the violin, one single violin, very drawn out, almost pathetic sounding, like a choking whisper. But then at the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, when all of Rohan's army, the Rohirrim, show up on the Pelennor Fields to save Gondor from Sauron's forces, we hear the full the full Rohan theme blaring in all of its glory when Rohan is at its peak. We hear dun 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 dun. It's all the horns and everything, right? This show and Bear McCreary and his, music production for it did the exact same goddamn thing. I think the best example of it has to be the Numenor theme. So here is how we hear the Numenor theme for the first time. By the way, could not be more, this sounds perfect for Numenor. When I imagine Numenor, when I read the Silmarillion and everything, this music fits so well with the vibe that I imagined for Numenor when I was a kid and I read the books. Listen to this. So that's how we hear the theme for the first time. The reason why I drew the Rohan comparison is because we get a very similar through line there. That's like the way we hear the theme for the first time when we first see Numenor in the show. But then, at a later point in the show, when we see the cavalry of Numenor with Galadriel and who they don't know to be Sauron riding up to a village in the Southlands to clear out the orcs, we hear this version of the theme. That's the good shit. That right there is the good shit. I like when different things have musical themes in media and the hype of it changes based on the context. That has always been a key aspect of any Middle Earth, I guess, productions on screen for me. And this show did not disappoint. So, I really don't know what else to talk about without just basically just ranting about all the things that I liked any longer. Isn't it weird how in retrospect that Sauron convinced Galadriel not to kill the Orc King? Oh, no, it is not weird at all. You see, Sauron is, kind of an egotistical douchebag who wants to kill that motherfucker himself. Sauron wants to, Adar. Season 2 is probably going to start with Sauron ripping Adar apart. The things that Sauron's gonna do to that motherfucker, if the story he told where he tried to kill Sauron and thought he did was true, he's in trouble. His orcs aren't gonna be able to protect him. He's fucked. Adar's gonna get cooed out of power in Mordor early in season 2, and Sauron's gonna take control. And we're gonna see the Dark Lord on his Dark Throne towards the beginning of season 2. Now, Isildur, who got lost after the eruption in the Southlands, or in Mordor, is also still there somewhere, most likely, unless Beric managed to save him, fast, which I think will happen. Seems like Isildur's horse Beric is going to save him. It has there's a line they pulled this from in the Unfinished Tales, where riders of their horse, horses and their riders from Numenor and Arnor and in the west and whatnot could supposedly form sort of a psychological bond with their horse and call them on command just by thinking. That was in the Unfinished Tales, though. So the level of canonality of that is questionable. Regardless, though, that seems to be where they pulled that from. So it seems like Isildur is going to summon Beric and he's going to save him. And hopefully he's already been saved by the final shot we see in Rings of Power, because Mordor is looking Mordory by the end there. Is Isildur still there somewhere? Is he captured by orcs? He's in trouble. We're going to have to see what happens there. Chronologically, Elendil should be founding Arnor in the west, if I'm not mistaken, and Isildur should be founding Gondor in the southeast, where we obviously know it to be. We already know that many of the people from the Southlands went to Peligir, the river Peligir, for the to set up a sort of survivor camp, a refugee camp. That is probably where I think Isildur is going to end up. Didn't the same thing happen with Aragorn? Yeah. Isildur founded Gondor. If I remember correctly, I haven't read the Silmarillion in a long time. He ended up very quickly taking control of it. His father did. I thought Isildur founded Arnor. Hold on a second. Elendil was welcomed to Eriador by the Elven King Gil-galad, and he founded the kingdom of Arnor, building the city of Anuminas as its capital. That is one I'd love to actually hear pronounced. So yeah, no, I was right. Elendil founded Arnor. So Isildur and Anarion were carried to the south, arriving all... okay, so Anarion seems to be gender swapped in the show, so we'll see whether or not his sister ends up helping him found Gondor. Doesn't seem likely, though. Isildur and Anarion were carried to the south, arriving at the mouths of the Anduin. They ascended the Great River and founded the realm of Gondor, while the exiles were establishing their realms in exile and 3320. However, Sauron had also escaped and reestablished power and order. Cool, yeah. So that probably works out for season 2 then. It seems pretty likely we might see the founding of Arnor and Gondor in season 2. So that should be pretty neat. That'll definitely be pretty neat. What else do I predict is going to happen? The 16 lesser rings have to be made. Unless they've already been made, which some people have theorized that, like, this show is a massive mystery, and that, like, Anatar is a form Sauron's been taking and fucking with the elves behind the scenes with. I don't think that's the case. It seems like to disarm us from, like, the knowledge that, oh, this is clearly Sauron. Mostly for casual fans, because when Halbrand walked into the fucking foundry, or walked into the workshop of Celebrimbor, I knew it right away. That was when it was 100% confirmed for me. When that motherfucker walked into Celebrimbor's workshop, I was like, that's Sauron. And when he said, consider it a gift, I was like, the Lord of Gifts. There he is, the Lord of Gifts in the flesh. So, there's a lot that's got to happen. Somehow, yeah, Elendil is not going to be a petty ship captain by the end of things. I'm just trying to think of what they'll do in season 2. Oh, Gandalf! I forgot! Oh my god, Gandalf! Okay, Daniel Wayman as Gandalf. I'm really liking him. And I am on team he's Gandalf. He is so fucking obviously Gandalf. From the way that he is imitating Ian McKellen's mannerisms playing Gandalf, to the quote, when in doubt, always follow your nose, to, like, just the way that it works better for it to be Gandalf, hanging out with these Harfoots, because, well, they could still roll with him being a blue wizard. That is still something they could do. And it would work considering the fact that Gandalf has not been to Rhûn, out to the east, and they're sending this Gandalf out to Rhûn in the east, and he's arrived earlier. They could make him a blue wizard. Doesn't seem likely, though. It seems very likely he's Gandalf. I automatically knew since he befriended Nori. The fact that the first life form he came into contact with was a hobbit, or a proto-hobbit, so to say, the Harfoots, definitely was a good sign from the start. Definitely a good sign from the start. That does not necessarily mean, though, he's not a blue wizard. Though I will say, if he was a blue wizard, it does feel like they would have given some hint to there being another one around, right? Because there's 2 blue wizards. And you'd think that there'd be some hint to the idea that there's another one of him out there he needs to find. What's a blue wizard? There are a total of 5 wizards in the order of Istari sent to Middle-earth. Saruman the White, Gandalf the Grey, Radagast the Brown, and the 2 blue wizards. Now, they all go by different names, and they are in reality sort of angelic beings called Maiar, sent by the Valar, which are like demigod beings, which are subservient to Eru Ilúvatar, who's like God, sent to Middle-earth to fight evil and to generally help the free peoples of Middle-earth to fight against Sauron's forces. So yeah, 5 basically demigod angels sent to Earth in the form of like old men wizards to help out. Is pretty much their whole deal. Are Harfoots not hobbits? Anatomically, they seem like they're pretty much hobbits, but like they're pretty much proto-hobbits. Like, the vibe that I get is they're gonna like move out west to where the Shire is and establish the Shire and become less of like a traveling race and more of like a sedentary, homely hobbit people, right? Anyway, Daniel Wayman, who is playing the Stranger, aka who I believe to be Gandalf. Amazing, all right? I don't know if I've ever said this before. Gandalf is my favorite character, period, in all of Middle-earth. In all of Tolkien's Legendarium, Gandalf is my favorite. I really couldn't tell you why. I mean, I could, but I'd be going on for too long. He is simply just my favorite. That is just how it is. And Ian McKellen's portrayal, to me, is fucking flawless and unbeatable. So far, though, Daniel Wayman's portrayal is very respectful. It feels like a love letter to Ian McKellen's portrayal of the character. I specifically went back and rewatched the scenes with him already from the finale, to see like how Gandalf like he is, and he really does. Like there's scenes where Nori says something to him and he realizes something and he copies Ian McKellen's facial like thing. You know how Ian, so when Gandalf will learn something, he'll sort of do this little eye twitch type thing, you know, as his mouth widens a little bit. He mimics that several times, mimics the mannerisms, the ways of speaking, repeats lines from Gandalf. I really liked it. I really like his portrayal. And frankly, I'm really, really excited to see where they go with this character in the future. I'm excited to see him more Gandalf-like. It's so subtle, but so good. It's very subtle, which is good, because if it was too on the nose, then it would feel desperate. You know? He shouldn't just be the Gandalf we know and love. Boom. He's him. He's got a long journey to go on. He's got thousands of years ahead of him before he's going to be meeting Bilbo or Frodo in the Shire and sending them off on their grand adventures. All that said, I fucking loved it. If you're a Tolkien purist who feels as though any adaptation of Tolkien's content to the screen that is not 100% faithful is thus bad, you might not like it. You might get triggered by changes they make, which in my opinion are quite small and inconsequential. You might get pissed off by it, but at the end of the day, every change they made from Tolkien's Legendarium, for me, and in my opinion, improved the story. That is just my opinion. I personally do not view everything that Tolkien wrote as unchangeable gospel. I don't think that like every word that Tolkien put to paper was fucking gold, was fucking mithril, and any change to it would only tarnish it. There's no improving that. I don't believe that. I do think that adaptions can make changes to Tolkien's original work, and it can work better, especially on screen. And so far, with season 1 of this show, I have fucking loved it. And I have no complaints. Well, I do. Well, why did I say I have no complaints? I do have a couple of complaints. My first complaint was about the first episode and its editing. I think they went back and changed this. I think Amazon unironically edited the episode after it came out, and now it is a different form of the episode than originally. When I watched the episode, the first episode on release night, I noticed several jarring cuts. And it was only in the first episode. They weren't in any of the other episodes, but when I, for the first time, watched episode 1, there were several jarring cuts that I noticed. They didn't ruin it for me. They were just jarring, you know, like the cut just kind of, boom. We were in another scene. It was like, whoa, okay, wow, all right. Like, and characters would just start talking immediately, and it was like, wow, that was a weird cut. Going back and rewatching the first episode, though, multiple times now, those cuts aren't there anymore. They smoothed out those cuts or changed the editing or whatever, because, like, that problem isn't there anymore, which I don't know if you could say is dishonest. It just seems like something good. But my vibe is that they actually went through and re-edited the first episode and updated it to make the edits a bit more smooth on that first episode, because there were some jarring cuts between like scenes in episode 1. One benefit of online streaming, that is a nice thing about the show being streamed online, is they, like, if there's a thing like that, like, oh hey, this scene is too dark and we can't see it, they can go into post-production and lighten it and then update the video on the streaming service so that it's seeable, right? Like they can, like HBO Max could do that with Game of Thrones season 8, or yeah, season 8, right? Yeah, season 8. They could do that. They could go through and like get rid of like the coffee cups and the make the scenes lighter and stuff like that. People complain about House of the Dragon having really dark scenes, and they're full of shit. I watched those scenes on my, like, the scenes they complained about on Twitter. I watched them on my monitor. No problems. No problems whatsoever. Learn how to configure your display settings. Please, for God's sakes, turn off motion smoothing. Anyway, with all that said, if you enjoyed this segment of me basically completely unstructured, just ranting about how much I liked this show, then consider leaving a like, because it does help out the channel more than you even realize, both if you're watching this live, or if you're watching this segment at, like, in the VOD after, you know, I've ended stream, or if you're watching this as a segment when it goes out on its own. Leaving a like helps out more than you even realize. It's not just a hollow show of support. It actually forces YouTube to push my content to more people in the algorithm, which means more people watching my videos, which means good things, in my opinion. And of course, if you want to support me and see more from me, you can subscribe and ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so YouTube tells you when I go live or I upload a new video. And you can also follow my social medias, linked all down below in the description, including my Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, fan Discord, and so on. And finally, if you want to support me financially, directly, you can do so quite easily by donating, subscribing, or gifting a sub on my website, xanderhall.com/live, or supporting me in the form of a donation through YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, or even through Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.